Seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Smell that? It smells like birds. Birds on the horizon. Football on the horizon. Talking all that, talking Flyers on this week's Sports Talk Philadelphia. Tyler Small couldn't make it today. We got a replacement. Austin Petolillo.
Yes, Petalillo.
Italian guy. Knows all these sports. He's going to talk. We got our usual guests, Giovanni Nolan, Caleb Flagger, and Jamie Smith. And we are talking Flyers. So disappointing Game 7, 4-0 loss. What went wrong? Shiban, why don't you start?
Literally everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. As much as I wanted us to win that game the way we were playing, we didn't deserve to. You'd think that Game 7, we fought so hard to get there, 3 overtime wins, worked our butts off for those wins, and then in Game 7 we play like we're not playing for anything. You know, we just got completely complacent. There was no fight, there was no desire. It's like they didn't want to win, which really disappointed and frustrated me. So honestly, they didn't deserve to win it as much as I would have liked to see them do so.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, I was happy to see them push to Game 7, but I just think that the offensive part was not there. I mean, the Flyers had 16 shots against the Islanders 26, and the shots were just not there, and I just didn't see them making that much of an effort. And I think it was a soft game for Carter Hart too. I mean, like, some of the goals that he let in were a little soft, and that was pretty disappointing to see. But overall, I mean, I'm glad we pushed it to a Game 7. Didn't like the outcome, but we'll see what happens next season. I mean, I've been saying that for 10 years now, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, there's just way too many mistakes on the Flyers' end in a Game 7. You have to play nearly perfect in a Game 7 to come out with the victory in those games. They just didn't play like they needed to win that game. But the Flyers are set up for the future. I mean, if you look at their main players, they're all in the age of like 21 to like 24 years old. So they are set for the future. So this was a good year for them to start.
You know, just kind of watching them in the bubble there, I thought even going back to the Montreal series, they were outplayed in almost every game. They kind of lacked that jam, as Laviolette would say, and it just seemed like every game against the Islanders, you're getting outshot like crazy. You know, the sloppy defensive play. It just seemed like outside of those round robin games where they look like world beaters, they kind of struggled a little bit. And I don't know what you have to do going into the offseason. I mean, no one from the top line showed up. It seemed like connecting to even score a goal, and he's your leading goal scorer. I mean, it's, you know, you're not going to win with that, but it just seemed like every game they got outplayed, and that's not going to be sustainable going forward.
And the worst part is they kept making the same mistakes every game. You know, they kept letting the Islanders push them around. They were strong for the first period or so, and then they let themselves fall into overcomplicated hockey. They were trying too hard to look fancy and make their plays, you know, look like highlight reels when the Islanders beat them with really simple hockey. And game after game, we saw that. And game after game, the Flyers didn't fix that mistake. They let themselves fall into the same patterns that obviously didn't work. And I think that was the most frustrating part for me, that they just kept making these obvious mistakes and then didn't really do anything to learn from it or fix them.
And they had 7 games to do it.
Exactly.
And for maybe 6, I guess. But, you know, the Islanders are a type of team that they're going to, you know, grit and grind, slow game, boring game, you know, and I guess the Flyers just weren't matched up for that. Now, if they did win, I don't know if they would have gotten past Tampa because they look like a wagon, but, you know, it would have been nice to see them win another series.
Because you kept seeing glimpses of potential with the Flyers, and we showed with our goals and how we could score early on that we can beat the Islanders and we can outplay them, but it's that problem with sustaining that energy and that tempo throughout the entire game that really just killed us.
Yeah, and the Flyers in the regular season were phenomenal as well. I think this is one of their best regular seasons, even though it was shortened. This is one of the best regular seasons we've seen out of them in years, and one of the most consistent seasons we've seen. We've seen the Flyers go 10 wins and then not make the playoffs. And it's disappointing to see that they can't keep that same energy in the playoff rounds. And as Austin said, the round robin, they looked unbeatable, and then they made it to the second round, and it's just like they lost that spark. And we got to just keep that energy up throughout the entire playoff rounds, and then we'll make it, but you never know.
And kind of going off that point, Jamie, do you think COVID had anything to do with the momentum kind of shifting for the Flyers after that long, 3-month break or something? The Flyers were going in so hot into the playoffs, and then a long 3-month break you think it had any impact at all on?
I mean, I'd like to say no, but it's just, I mean, they made it. You saw them in the round robin, and they were just a consistent team, and they were playing exactly how they were playing in the regular season. And I'm not sure what happened within the playoffs, but it's like they wanted it and they made it, and they just lost it. And I'm not sure what happened there, but I guess, and you weren't really seeing a lot from their older players either. I mean, as you said, Travis Konechny barely did anything in the play. I mean, their star players, he barely did anything in the playoffs, along with Giroux. He only scored, 1 goal in the playoffs, and that's just something you can't see from the older players.
And the fact is, the momentum affects everybody. It affected every team. And you can only use that excuse so many times to just excuse mediocre playing. So I think it did affect them to a point, but didn't really slow down the Islanders, didn't slow down Tampa. So I think we can't use that as too much of an excuse as to why we didn't play as well as we could have, because obviously other teams were able to bounce back and outplay us.
I'm not going to get mad at players for kind of not showing up. I get it. The bubble life, it's probably really difficult. They've been away from their families. Players are having newborn babies. They're not, there for their growth. I can't get mad at them for that. But, like you said, I do think, it's an even playing field. Everyone's in the bubble. Everyone's got the same circumstances. And, it kind of just showed that, you got to go up against everyone. Everyone's got the same cards. And looks like the Flyers, they weren't really prepared, I guess, after that round robin.
And that shows that the mental toughness has to be there. We all know that the Flyers are physically tough. We can play physical hockey, but the mental strength has to be there. And I think that was a big part of why we fell so hard at the Islanders, is because over time, we just didn't have the mentality and the mindset that we needed to win.
For me, being in the bubble kind of showed what team wanted it more, in a sense, because it made the stakes that much harder not being with your family. And it showed what teams really kept that chemistry, being not together for 3 months at a time. That coming back together like that is pretty hard. So I think being in a bubble like this really shows what teams had it this year and what didn't. So.
Yeah, and kind of going off a point you made earlier, Caleb, with the foundation of this team, how do we feel about the future of the Flyers? Do we see a possible cup run in the coming seasons? With it to me, it seems like they do have a career goalie that they can rely on, and they do have a new coach that obviously took them pretty far this year. So how do we feel about the future for the Flyers?
The future seems pretty bright. I mean, Carter Hart, I think he just turned 21 years old, so I think a couple of us are older than him. But I mean, coach, this was a great first year. I mean, I don't think any of us really expected him to make it this far this year, and they did. So that was a step in the right direction. And they just have a bunch of players that they've been drafting for the past 8 years now. So their picks are starting to finally get old enough to start playing in the games like this. So I don't know. The Flyers did a really good job drafting, unlike the Eagles and the Sixers and all those other teams. So players are starting to finally come up for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with Caleb in the fact that we've been drafting really well. We have a lot of promising players in Lehigh. We have a couple of really good players that are playing college hockey right now. And with Elaine Vigneault, with Konechny, Hart, hopefully Nolan Patrick can come back soon, crossing my fingers for that. Now that Lindblom is back and he's ready to skate and he's ready to play, with all of those factors put together, we have a really bright future, and we do have a really good chance at winning multiple cups in the coming years. So I really think that with those foundations, we can put forward a good future.
And this is a team that you see with really great chemistry as well, and that definitely shows on the ice. And I just think that they need to get their mojo back next season. This is only the beginning, and we have a lot of new talent. I think our goalie situation is the best it's been in years and consistent. Elliott's a great backup. Carter Hart has been consistent since day one. I just think that chemistry that they show off ice and as well as on the ice just needs to grow from here.
I think the only thing that would really stop this team is injuries, which in hockey, you're going to have injuries. But yeah, great future. Finally have a reliable goaltender that they can have for maybe upwards of 20 years. I think they need a little bit improvement on the back line with the defense, but maybe just adding one, maybe two guys. And, if Nolan Patrick comes back, then I think they're golden.
From one end to a season to a brand new season with the Eagles starting just this week, playing Washington. Just Washington is the name now, which is weird to say, but the offseason moves. It's been a strange offseason for the Eagles, I would say. Obviously, they lost Dillard and re-signed Peters, and then they lost Brandon Brooks. What is the biggest acquisition for the Eagles this season? What would you guys say?
I think it's not even a new guy. I think it's Deshaun Jackson. They had him for one game last year and maybe like one snap in another game. You just got to hope with injuries. And he's an older guy. You don't know how older guys are going to react to injuries. You better hope he's got the same speed, the same ability to take the top off the defense. I think if he's back and he is there for not even 16, maybe like 14 games, I think that's going to be the biggest acquisition.
For me, it's got to be Darius Slay. I mean, if you look at the Eagles secondary the past 5 seasons, we haven't had a true number one corner on that team in so long. And I'm so happy that Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas are gone, because I'm so sick and tired of watching them every Sunday just get burnt over and over again. We have no replacement for them. I'm so happy they're off the team. The Eagles finally have legit corners this season. So props to Howie for getting Roby Coleman this offseason, for getting Darius Slay. For me, the biggest acquisition is definitely boosting up the secondary this season.
Yeah, I think with the secondary, the Eagles secondary, there's a little bit of a problem now. I think Slay is a great cornerback. I don't necessarily agree with the extension they gave him, given his age, and you look at history, that doesn't really work out too well. But outside of him, you don't really have an outside corner. Maddox is a slot guy by trade. Roby Coleman's a slot guy. LeBlanc's a slot guy. They don't really have an outside corner. So if Slay goes down, I think they are screwed in the secondary. If anyone, maybe worse comes to worse, and that is absolute worse, you bring Jalen Mills down to play cornerback again, and we all know what that looks like.
Yeah, I do agree. That would probably what would be happening, because they do have a lot of safeties on that team. So I'm assuming they'd probably switch Mills down to corner, which I don't even agree with. I think they should have just kept Mills at number 2 corner to begin with and had Slay at number 1, and then start Will Parks or Kayvon Wallace at safety. I don't know, but.
Yeah, I think it's so typical of Howie to have such little depth at corner, because I think they're trying to transition into like an all-tool area where you kind of play at all different kinds of positions, but we'll see how that works out. They also drafted, obviously, Jalen Hurts with their second-round pick. That was a huge uproar, huge controversy in the Eagles community. Personally, I don't hate the pick. I think it's good for a backup, and I do think that Doug will incorporate him into the offense in some kind of way, trick plays. Doug's shown creativity like that before. I don't hate the pick. So what do you guys think of Jalen Hurts and his role on this team?
I definitely don't hate the pick. If you look at it, especially at the times we're in with coronavirus, there may not be a college football season next year. So I thought this pick was thinking towards the future, but also has some safety for Carson Wentz. I mean, if you look at the future part of it, if there isn't a college football season next year, then you aren't seeing any college QB prospects playing. So if you look at Joe Burrow last year, he was projected to be a 6th-round draft pick. That college football season boosted his stock all the way up to the first overall pick. Not having a season, you can't see any of these QB prospects. So teams know what Jalen Hurts can do. They know what he's done. if there's a QB needy team next year, they might be willing to give more than a second round pick for what we drafted him for. So I thought it was a really good pick. We'll see how it works out, but I definitely would see him in some trick plays this year for the Eagles.
That's big brain analysis right there. I like that.
I wasn't too high on Hurts coming out of Oklahoma. I thought, he's a product of the system. You look at Kyler Murray, you look at Baker Mayfield, guys that have really excelled in that Lincoln Riley system down in Norman. I just feel like, maybe you could use him in like a Taysom Hill, Joe Webb type of role where like he's like a tight end sort of thing or like a wildcat kind of quarterback, but I think his frame, he's not really the biggest guy. I think he's a little small, and he might get knocked around a little bit in that kind of role. He doesn't have a pocket to protect them if they're using him to catch passes or run the ball. But I'm very intrigued to see how they would use him, or if they will even use him. They might just stash him, develop him, and maybe send him out somewhere next year.
All right. So what would you identify as the biggest strength on this team and the biggest weakness? Like, for instance, I would say the offensive line obviously is a huge weakness for them. And if Peters goes down, I don't even know who they go to. Maybe Mailata. I don't even know. But, I think that's kind of where the season kind of lies, is how well the offensive line holds up. But strength, I would say, actually the wide receiver core. I actually really like the wide receiver core this year. I do think Rager's going to step up really well as a rookie, and hopefully Deshaun can stay healthy as well. But what do you guys think?
I think the biggest strength is the front four. You're 3 deep at D tackle. You're 3-4 deep on the edge. They're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to stop the run. I think that is by far their biggest strength. You got some players. Fletcher Cox, he's a top 5 defensive tackle. You bring in Javon Hargrave, a good run stopper. Malik Jackson, you get him back. He played, maybe 2 snaps in the opening game last year. On the edge, you got Barnett, you got Brandon Graham, you got Vinny Curry in a rotational role. I think they're going to be very good on the defensive line. In terms of weakness, I think, like you said, I think it's the offensive line. It's kind of like a half makeshift O-line. You don't have Brooks. You don't have Dillard. You got to put Jason Peters and his 4 false start penalties back on the tackle position. It's going to be kind of weird to see how they do, sort of. They don't really have that strong, but they still have Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey. Sayamalu is, he's okay. He's not the greatest thing in the world, but he'll be serviceable. I think, what you've seen with them in the past is an O-line that helps the Eagles win. I think it's going to be an O-line that's going to just kind of be okay and, not help them, but, not hurt them either.
Yeah, their biggest strength this year, like you said, Austin, is definitely going to be a defensive line. I mean, adding Javon Hargrave to what they already had last year with Malik Jackson didn't even play. I think he didn't even play like two series drives for them. So, I mean, even having him back, I mean, the depth in that line is insane. But my biggest weakness, I look at the linebacker crew. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a weakness right now, but they are very young. None of them are very proven. We don't really know what's going on in that secondary. For me, I know we have TJ Edwards, who's an undrafted rookie last year. I know he's pretty decent. They drafted 2 guys, Davion Taylor and I think Sean Smith out of Temple. Those guys, I think that's about it. I mean, they're all rookies. They're very inexperienced. I know that the NFL is kind of leaning away from a middle linebacker game. They're adding more like corners and stuff now, but that's a big gap for me is the middle linebacker.
Totally agree.
All right, so final wrap-up thoughts on the Eagles. What's your overall prediction for the season? Did they make the playoffs? What record do you think they'll have? I think they'll make it. 11-5 is my prediction. What do you guys think?
Looking at their schedule, I was looking at today. I think it's a lot harder than people might think. I have them going anywhere from 8-8 to 11-5. I don't think they're going to win the division. I think Dallas they're loaded this year. I think. As much as Eagles fans don't want to hear that, I just think Dallas, CeeDee Lamb, their offense is going to be crazy, and their defense got better. I think Dallas will win the division. I think the Eagles will make the playoffs as a wild card, but I think it might be another one and done year.
Yeah, I have the Eagles going 12-4 this year. I have them beating out the Dallas Cowboys. I think Dallas Cowboys will get a wild card spot. I think if Dallas wins the division, the Eagles get a wild card. One of those two, they're both going to make it.
Yeah.
I just feel like the Eagles' defensive depth this year is different. I mean, if you look at our defense has completely changed since last year. No Malcolm Jenkins. The cornerback room has completely changed. We've added depth to the defensive line. Our safety room looks a lot different. I mean, as long as there's no injuries this year, which I'm praying for, we stay healthy. I mean, we're going to be a really good football team. Because Carson Wentz has great new weapons around him this year. He should have an MVP type season like he did in 2017. So I have big things for the Eagles this year. I'm really hoping.
All right. Well, win on Sunday? Yes, no?
Definitely, 100%.
I think they'll win. I think it's going to be very low scoring. I'm a Carolina Panther fan, so I know Ron Rivera. I know his sort of style. He's big on defense. And I think Washington, they have a really, really good defensive line. Chase Young, Ryan Kerrigan, Montez Sweat. They're 3 deep at D tackle. Both teams are going to get after the quarterback. Both teams are going to stop the run. But I think Wentz will do enough to give them a win. I say 17-13 Philly.
All right. I feel like they start every season against Washington. I don't know why. But anyway, let's move on. Let's talk a little fantasy. I know a lot of people out there are big fantasy football. To me, it didn't even feel like fantasy football was happening this year. And then I just had a draft yesterday, and it was pretty crazy because it was like, oh my God, like it's a whole nother world right now. Anyway, who is your fantasy football MVP in the entire league? Not just
it's got to be my boy C-Mac. He is just I watch him play every game, and just the things he does in the passing game and the running game, going between the tackles, outside zones. He gets touches like crazy, and he had a career year with Kyle Allen as his quarterback, who was a backup on like the second worst team in the NFL. And I think when you bring in Teddy Bridgewater, who is excellent in the short passing game, that's where McCaffrey thrives. I think he's going to have another fantastic year.
Yeah, I agree with that, Austin. But I'd look at Lamar Jackson again. Just when you have a dual threat QB that they throw about 20, 25 times a game, but then he also rushes for about 5 to 10 times a game, which Lamar Jackson, almost every game, he's pushing near 100 rush yards a game, and then close to a touchdown, and then he's throwing. So, like, when you get when you start getting the rushing points added in and the throwing points, I mean, when you have a dual threat QB like that, it's really nice to have on your fantasy football team.
And for me, wide receiver, I would say my boy Devontae Adams doesn't get enough love. I think Aaron Rodgers also is every year he's a little more underrated, and I think he's going to have a big comeback year, especially since it's like no crowd, and he thrives with no emotion at all. He's a emotionless slate, and I think he's going to have Devontae go off this year. And then with running backs, Saquon's got to be, I mean, the man's thighs are tree trunks. I mean, they're incredible. So those are my 2 MVPs. As far as sleeper picks go, who's your guy's biggest sleeper? Who's the one guy that nobody talks about that is going to have a big season?
I would say Miles Sanders, just because I think he's gonna have a really big year. Like I honestly might think he might be in like MVP talks and that type of stuff, because the way the Eagles are going to use him, there's not a lot of running back depth on the Eagles, so I think Miles is going to be one of those guys that's going to be touching the ball 30 times a game, 15 times rushing, he's going to be catching the ball a lot of the backfield. So he's going to be getting a lot of touches this year, so we'll be excited to see what Miles Sanders does.
I have 2. So I don't want to sound too much like a homer here, but I think DJ Moore, he's a solid wide receiver 2 in fantasy. I think he's going to get wide receiver 1 production this year. Like I said about Teddy Bridgewater, he's good in the short passing game, the intermediate game. What does DJ Moore do best? He runs slants, he runs outs, he runs ins, he runs curls. He is going to get so many targets in this offense. He's going to get the ball so many times. He's going to have a pretty good year. And in terms of someone that people really aren't talking about, I think Preston Williams on Miami is going to be a stud. He was a stud coming out of, I think it was Colorado State. He was really good last year, but he got hurt a little bit. I think this year he's going to have a pretty good year too. So keep an eye out for Preston Williams. I know I have him in a few keeper leagues that I'm in, so I'm hoping he does well.
Really, everybody on Miami is a sleeper at this point.
Yeah.
So that about does it for this week of Sports Talk Philadelphia. Thanks for watching. Sayonara.